Do I see you raise your hand, Ryan?
No, but I'll go. Why
Okay.
not? I've got I've got a bunch of stuff that I'm trying to work on really, and it's kind of getting from like CLD level to say CLA level. Um, and so I guess to narrow it a little bit, I'll just pick one. Maybe I'll list them all off here, but kind of trying to get into test-driven design, object-oriented design, transitioning to more official-ish software engineering practices, generating reuse libraries, getting into more advanced architectures. I've been here for 3 years and inherited most of the code that I still work on. And they're written well and modular enough. They're all QMH based, but we have some enormous VIs still within here. I mean, there's a couple thousand VIs in it, and some of them are just giant. And I guess I'll couple the two. Is I want to get into test-driven design, and at the same time, I also want to kind of refactor some of these large pieces of code and integrate test-driven design into doing that. And I'm struggling with how to start implementing it. That I was talking with you, Sam, last week, that I understand I can create test-driven design for like very, very low level, like method level tests, but I'm not sure how to start going into testing things on a larger level, like say on like more of a module level, or say I build a class that does something, and how do I test the VI that calls these classes in here? So yeah, I guess that's how do I jump from the level of very granular testing and trying to test a little bit more in the middle.
All right, thank you, Ryan. Who has some questions for Ryan? I will go first. Go.
I have one. Do you have a small new project to start on, or do you have to refactor the whole bunch at a time? Because if it worked for me to start with something new to do the test-driven and the unit testing, and then implement it on the big chunks of older code while refactoring, but learn the unit testing on something new.
Okay.
As refactoring and testing at the same time, that was a bit hard. Then I didn't know where to start. So do you have a small new project?
Nothing major at the moment, but I could create one here. And some of them, what I'm working on now is kind of like small, almost script level stuff. But again, I can indeed incorporate tests into it while I'm doing it.
All right, other questions for Ryan? What resources are you using? Where are you going for information on unit testing? Like what sources have you tried for learning unit testing?
You, for one. Then some of the CLA summit material, online forums, some of those basically. I guess I've started playing with and starting to understand. I've been using the JKIVI tester.
Okay, more questions, anyone? Is the program, you said it's fairly modular, so is it possible to take one module and just write a test for that particular module, or is it kind of coupled, or?
Both. They're all pretty tightly coupled. But yes, I could indeed take part of it. But again, like what I'm looking at, so it means I have, one of my modules just does data acquisition, shoves the data into a queue, and then I have another module that pulls from that queue and writes data to a CVT.
Okay.
And that's a state machine. So where do you put unit tests inside that state machine? Like, how do you test the state machine? Or are you testing the small bits of code that are inside of it?
Yeah, those are good questions. Anybody else have any other questions before we move to solutions?
Have you had like a big with what you're currently doing? I mean, what's your motivation behind asking the question? Like, are you trying to solve a particular issue?
No, I honestly, I don't have a particular like concrete problem that I'm trying to solve. This is just kind of, I guess this is more what this is a big, I know, open-ended question that's not really, it's not going to have a defined answer to it. But I guess that's kind of the level of where I'm at is I'm kind of an intermediate. I'm looking to get more advanced, and these are some of the concepts that I'm struggling with. So no,
Okay.
I don't have a specific problem.
I do have one more question then. So are you refactoring this because it needs refactoring because you're trying to add some features to it, or are you refactoring it just as a learning exercise, I guess would be a question.
I guess a little of both. I'm refactoring it because who I inherited it from, he learned how to do LabVIEW through this process, and there's a lot of just copy and pasted code. I have basically, like, on the real-time side and on the host side, I just have a couple of like mega clusters. And so, yeah, to add a function to it, it's a real pain in the ass, and it affects a lot of code. When I change that one, if I add one type def into this cluster, it is a type def, it goes everywhere, and all of a sudden all this code's calling all these things. So it's a little of both. Like I think it would help me moving forward. And then it's also just a great learning experience to start writing better code, not using this code as a template anymore as my I've lost the word. Yeah, kind of as a template.
Yeah,
Okay.
let me ask. This is Brad. I got a quick question. So, the motivation for refactoring it, or the motivation for creating test cases, can be twofold, right? I mean, you can be trying to create test cases because you're looking at trying to make the code more efficient. You're looking at trying to make its memory usage smaller. You're looking at trying to make it more adaptable for adding new things, right? So that's one part, right? Another thing you might want to do if you're trying to build test cases is take, and you talk about you have this huge giant cluster. Well, probably not everything is used in that cluster. It's kind of a God cluster, and it has all this information that gets transformed to every different place, right? So you might want to look at dividing it up by its functionality and by what uses what pieces of those. So you can try to look at re-architecting it. And if you re-architect it, now you can make it more compartmentalized, and then you can make test cases for each one of those compartments and then start inserting it into your code. And now you can put a test case that allows you to retest it, make sure you haven't broken anything as you're going through this process. But as you reinsert it, you build test cases for each individual piece. So now it becomes, you start creating a reuse library for part of it. You start creating, benchmarks and so on that you can tell whether you actually made any improvement into, how fast it is, how reliable it is, how much memory it uses, right? And then how many things are affected by either its inputs or its outputs, right? And then you can kind of make them into single elements now that you can regression test, so you can further define them without breaking everything because you built a test case around them that basically exercises everything that's going to try to do.
Okay.
That might be a way to divide it up because you're talking about very large VIs and you're talking about a very large cluster, and that cluster probably doesn't affect everything, but when you change it, it affects everything because you have to go and define it for everything, right? So if you kind of look at what gets broken for what you're doing, you can kind of start looking at desegmentizing those pieces, right, and making it more modular.
Right.
Chime in on that too. I wanted to add a lot of what Brad says is true, but if you're going to have a God object and you're breaking it up and you still need to share it with a lot of VIs, maybe your God object becomes DVR references.
Right.
And that way it's still in memory and everyone just needs this reference, which can be created at the construct time or start time. and then everyone has the reference. You can pull the data whenever you want, modify it however you want, and it doesn't impact you on the wire per se. We saved a lot of time and memory by using DVR references for large godlike objects. It tends to help a lot with that parallel read access too that they now have.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm going to recommend that you go find a presentation by Fabiola called Finding the Meatballs in the Spaghetti.
Okay.
That's a very good good presentation. She's got a bunch of stuff on testing too. I think part of the reason that you're finding it challenging is you've got this big spaghetti mess and you're trying to figure out how to write tests for the big spaghetti mess, right? And that is challenging.
Yeah, I'm looking a little bit smaller than like the whole thing. I'm not trying to test my entire piece of code by any means, but I am looking at like how small do I have to get to have effective testing?
Yeah, so you know, if you're going to change a particular VI, right, you can kind of take that VI and wrap it and try to test its inputs, outputs, and then make some changes. And I mean, I do think you're on the right track with trying to do some testing, because you want to make sure, right, when you mess with the house of cards, that you don't pull out the wrong card and the whole thing collapses.
Right.
Right.
And start by testing the happy path.
Okay. Right.
No.
Right. Start with the easy test.
The ones you know this goes well, and don't test for any special cases or errors. Just if I have this input, should go this output, and not if there's another number or an error. Just the first test you make are the happy ones, the ones that should go well.
Okay.
Yeah, and another piece of good advice that I got, I think from James McNally or Fabiola, was as soon as you come across a bug in your code or a customer reports a bug, create a unit test for that.
Yep.
And then over time, the pieces of code that have the bugs get all the test cases. But yeah, definitely have practice on like the good known working code.
Okay.
And I would also add too, there's like a couple things going on here. One is like trying to test this hard to test code too, but the other thing is just being able to write good unit tests in general. And I think Stefan hinted at that at the beginning, that if you can practice writing unit tests on new stuff, if any new stuff comes along, that's going to make it a lot easier, because part of it is getting comfortable with using unit tests, period. And then part of it is how do I fit them into this big mess?
Right.
So separate things.
You said that you're using the QMH framework.
Yeah.
So QMH or state machines. I'm using a JKI tester with Actor framework, which is both very object oriented and goes very well together. My feeling is that on state machines and maybe on QMH, I'm not that familiar with that. Karaya would be better because they're more in place tests. So you put a test somewhere in your state machine and it tests there. It's not that object oriented. So
okay.
You should try that one.
Okay.
All right, so hopefully that was useful. Anybody else got any more suggestions for Ryan before we move on?